welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris. That is A to Z Sports writer Zach Reagan right across from me. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to that regularly, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify, and rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss us when we drop the new episodes on Mondays. And if you subscribe on YouTube, go to A to Z Sports. Just type that in on the search bar on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. And if you do that, you'll be able to see the live stream that we do right here, that we're doing currently as I speak, as people are rolling in to watch. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach and I write on the internet. It's a big week, Zach, because Tennessee has put themselves in the position where this is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, in years past, this has been where Tennessee kind of makes up some ground, where it's like, all right, you lost to Alabama, you lost to Georgia, you lost to Florida. We got to win these ones on the back end and make sure that we're, win 7 games or whatever. And now you're 7-0, just smashed UT Martin. We're going to talk briefly about what happened in that game before we get to the keys on how to beat Kentucky. But 7-0, and this is where you go to compete for a national championship here. Are you a contender or are you a pretender? And it starts this week, really. What's up, man? How we doing, Zach?
I think we're still celebrating that Alabama win, it feels like. I mean,
it's
like they played UT Martin and they demolished them, obviously, and all anybody still wants to talk about is that Alabama win, which I get. I mean, that's the way it should be. That's what we knew it would be if they did beat Alabama. So really fun time, really good environment and or vibes right now, and you got a chance to go to 8-0 this week. I mean, it's just you should go to 8-0. It's not a chance to go to 8-0. Tennessee should go to 8-0 if they go out there and play their game against Kentucky, and it's incredible. I mean, everybody's talking about Tennessee. You turn on Sports Center, and when's the last time that Tennessee's like leading the leading story on Sports Center? I mean, even on Sunday morning after UT Martin, they're still showing those highlights because they know everybody loves Tennessee. They know everybody loves Jalen Hyatt and seeing him make these huge splash plays. And you've got, NFL draft talk about these guys. They're leading the nation in several important statistical categories. It's a really fun time right now, and just take it in, embrace it, and it's not the time to be skeptical. It's the time to lean into it and have fun with it.
It's still hard to believe that this is really the world that we're living in.
It's the reality. It's real.
Yeah, it is what it is. Here's Crazy Nugs in the comments doing my job for me. He says, smash that like button. Yes, please do. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you may be watching, and share the show. If we want as many people in here as possible. I can't, the numbers on this show, guys. A clip we posted last week of the show got like 13,000 views. And I'm as far as like Tennessee shows go, that's bigger than like the big boys, guys. It's unreal. I can't believe it. Thank you so much to everybody that watches and comments. It's insane. But anywho, so like buttons, notification bells, y'all know what to do. But we're going to get into everything starting with UT Martin. Then we're going to go into the Kentucky game and kind of meld all that conversation all together. But Zach and I both have, like in weeks past, we have our 3 keys to beat Kentucky. That's going to be the main conversation on this. And I actually like this suggestion. Maybe we can pencil this one in. Michael Allen in the comments says, I know this is Tennessee, Kentucky focused, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on Brian Kelly's comments on Tennessee after they beat Ole Miss. And Zach, I believe you wrote about this on A to Z Sports. So we can get to that too. But before we do, I got to tell everybody about our awesome friends at Superbook Sports. They keep this show running. Can you beat Vegas this football season? Superbook Sports gives you that chance every week to go head-to-head with the best odds makers in Las Vegas. No fancy computer algorithms. No guys across the pond setting lines for American sports. Just the best team of odds makers in the business behind the counter at Superbook in Las Vegas. Plus, Superbook features some of the best odds boosts and promo bets you can find anywhere. So go and download the Superbook Sports app right now. Visit superbook.com and start your battle against Vegas. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Superbook Sports and Zach on Superbook. Tennessee against UT Martin was a 38-point favorite. At one point, they were leading by 51 points. I believe they ended up winning by 41. UT Martin made up some ground there in garbage time playing against the third string. Tennessee against Kentucky, a 12-point favorite. When I looked at it this morning on the Superbook app, you can go bet on the Vols there if you are one of the folks that does that. I think I've said it before. I'm a little superstitious. I'm not superstitious. I'm a little stitious. And I don't bet on the Vols. I just can't bring myself to do it. But let's get into this UT Martin game just quickly before we move on to Kentucky. And Zach, my first question is this, because people have been talking about this. Is Josh Heupel like a little vindictive? Little kind of sticking it to guys that he doesn't, he's had some battles with in the past. Now this, I don't know how much bad blood there really is here, but the coach for UT Martin is the dad of Ty Simpson, who is a quarterback now at the University of Alabama. And Ty Simpson, his recruitment came down to, or he was very much in the mix with Jeremy Pruitt when Jeremy Pruitt was the coach of Tennessee. And then he let Heupel give him the pitch there at the end of his recruitment, and ultimately he shunned Tennessee, went to Alabama. Josh Heupel comes into this game. He's going for it on fourth down from his own 35-yard line at one point. He's late in the second half when he's already up by like 40. He's running a tight end pass play. Also, people were mad that he let Gaston Moore air out a pass on the final play of the game. They're like, "Well, this is unsportsmanlike. How dare you?" But is Heupel vindictive, Zach? Or you think he's just that guy?
I mean, I saw all that talk too. I think I kind of started a little bit of it at one point, just kind of for fun. But I don't necessarily think that's what was going on there. From everything I've heard, I don't know the Simpson family personally, but it seems like they have a reputation for being great people. And Ty, I remember listening to all of his radio interviews that he was doing, and I know there's some talk about if he led Tennessee on or not, but at the same time, he's 17, 18-year-old kid going through the recruiting process. I thought he handled it pretty well. I thought he tried to give Tennessee a chance, but it was so early in the process. Heupel hadn't even coached a game yet at Tennessee. I could understand why he committed to Alabama at that time. Now, if that same battle was happening now, I think it would go a little bit differently since Tennessee's kind of the it team right now. But I just think it was Josh Heupel utilizing what he had there. I mean, that's a chance to get some young guys in. It's kind of like an extended practice in a way, or a scrimmage where you get to try some things. You get to put some things on tape that other teams have to prepare for. And I think we've seen Heupel doing that in a variety of ways throughout the season, where we've seen some different formations and different things they can do out of those formations. Teams have to prepare for that down the road. Kentucky, Georgia coming up, South Carolina later on this season. They're going to be watching that film, and they got to be prepared for that. So I think that was part of it. I think you want to get your young guys as much run as possible, and you don't want to just put your quarterbacks in there and just hand the ball off, because that's not really that productive for them and their development. So when you got guys late in the game and you have that opportunity, you got to take advantage of it. And I don't think there was any bad blood there. I mean, UT Martin's still playing hard. They're putting points on the board. Like you said, they closed the gap a little bit from a 50-some point loss to a 40-point loss. So it's just kids out there playing, and every opportunity you get to go into Neyland Stadium and play, you got to take advantage of it. And I think if you ask UT Martin's players, they'd want to be out there playing to the very end too, and doing all they can do. Look, Gaston Moore throws that interception at the end of the game. I was surprised they threw it. I was standing right in front of the UT Martin player in the end zone as he made that catch, and it kind of caught me off guard as I was expecting just a run play or a kneel right there, and all of a sudden the ball's flying at me. But if you're that kid for UT Martin, I mean, you got an interception in Neyland Stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life. So is he mad that Tennessee was throwing it there? I'm guessing probably not. So I don't think that's what Hypo is doing. I just think he's that dialed in to wanting to improve every chance he gets. And he wasn't necessarily happy after the game with the way that the young guys played too. So I think that was exactly what he was trying to do, was just get them some reps and see what they could do in those situations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think actually Josh kind of makes a good point here that I hadn't really thought about. He said UT Martin kind of made us throw it over the top at the end. They kept stacking the box. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's true. That's all they were really doing because they knew that was going to be the primary thing that Tennessee did. So sure. And yes, exactly to your point. I mean, these kids practice and play all the same as Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt and everybody else. Give them a chance. Let them do it.
You only get so many Saturdays to play college football. Who wants to go out there and just run the ball for 8 minutes in the fourth quarter? Let them play. I mean, just whatever happens, happens.
I like this from Evan. To your point of people remembering what they do in Neyland Stadium, he says, I am legitimately 2 for 2 passing all time in Neyland Stadium, the high school football jamboree in 2012 and 2013. Hey,
look, I would bring that up. I would bring that up everywhere I went. Like, people
absolutely
would hate me because I would always work that into a conversation. It wouldn't even be relevant to football. And I'd be like, well, speaking of, what's on sale this week, did you know I completed a couple passes in Neyland?
It's no big deal.
Yeah.
But one time I threw passes in Neyland. But I think on the whole, this is as good as a snoozer game could go for you.
Mm-hmm.
For a number of reasons. You came out essentially unscathed.
Except for Taven Jackson,
he's
not available this week against Kentucky, which is not – you don't want to see a guy hurt, but that's not going to impact what Tennessee does against Kentucky.
If Taven Jackson is playing, you're already in trouble. And it's, who knows? It looked separated shoulder, broken collarbone. He got smashed on that play. But beyond that, Elijah Simmons went down. But then today in the press conference, Heupel said he expects him to be available against Kentucky. So that's good.
He's not playing a ton of snaps right now anyway, if you look at the snap counts. So
yeah, they've tightened down that rotation at most positions on the team. And yeah, he's a depth piece at this point, but still good. In case you have injuries, you want to have that guy around. But otherwise, essentially unscathed. And then Heupel today mentions Cedric Tillman. He really said there's no change, but the guys that report on the team have tried to see different opinions. It seems like everybody is kind of thinking he's playing this week. It still feels like it might be limited. Like he might not be full bore go. I don't know, but it seems like the conventional wisdom around the situation with Cedric Tillman is he's going to be a guy against Kentucky that he'll get in the game.
Well, they don't really have to rush him back, and I think that's what we've seen is the way that Jalen Hyatt has obviously stepped up, and he's the most dynamic wide receiver in the country right now. He's leading the nation or leading the SEC in receiving yards, leading the nation in receiving touchdowns. You have him. Brew McCoy has been very solid for Tennessee, and then Ramel Keaton has stepped up to be a key player for Tennessee and has made some really great catches and really great plays. And the way that they've kind of stepped up to fill that void has given you a luxury where you don't have to rush Tillman back. And I think, they originally said that his goal was to be back for the Alabama game. And I wonder if Hyatt, if Keaton, if some of those guys had not stepped up the way they had, would we have seen Tillman rush back and play kind of limited in that Alabama game? I don't know. It still seems like he just wasn't ready to go, but I do think that's factored into the way they've handled Tillman's situation.
Yeah, I agree. They've made it so easy on that comeback just with how well everything has gone. I mean, it's got to be beyond your wildest dreams if you're specifically from Jalen Hyatt. I mean, it's just unreal. And then on top of that, you have Brew making the clutch pass to set up the field goal against Alabama and making plays like that, even if he hasn't put up the totally gaudy numbers like Hyatt has. But it really is a luxury, frankly. I think that's the best word, the way that this offense is played. And it's incredible they're going to be able to add him back on top of what's already happening. But I
think Mark here makes a good point. you really want to have him for Georgia. That's the
Yes.
most important thing. You beat Alabama
Agreed.
without him. You beat LSU without him. I think you can beat Kentucky without him. But Georgia, that's the big one. I mean, that's the biggest game remaining on the schedule. It'll be the biggest college football game of the year at that point whenever Tennessee and Georgia play. So that's where you really want Cedric Tillman to be back on the field.
Yeah, if you get past Kentucky this week, you want every single weapon to be 100% full bore ready to go in Athens. Because that's what's standing between you and a spot in the playoff. I mean, you beat Georgia. You beat Georgia and
beat South Carolina and take care of business. Yeah,
you win out. I mean, you're essentially guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. So that's what.
And even if you lose to Georgia, you still have an outside shot of.
You still a pretty decent chance. I believe the current formulation that I saw said Tennessee is at around 51% chance to make it to the college football playoff in their current setup. So we'll see. That was according to like ESPN or something. But outside of injuries and everything, I mean, all of that went well. Hopefully Tillman comes back this week. But besides that, the thing that I probably love the most in this game, I mean, I love just the aggression and Heupel kind of having that not giving a crap attitude. That's awesome. But that's the way he's been since he showed up. I love that he's in a snoozer game introducing new concepts to throw off upcoming opponents, because he doubled down on the fullback set, ran it twice, successfully both times, and one of them from 11 yards out, and just such a great run by Princeton Fant.
I almost think that was an accidental touchdown, because I think they wanted to get Hooker another passing touchdown there, and they also wanted to give that look like, hey, we're committed to running out of this formation, because there's been a lot of talk about what else can Tennessee do from this formation. I think they want to show people like that wasn't just a one-time thing. We can run this whenever we want, wherever we want. And then Princeton Fant ends up in the end zone. It was kind of funny the way that worked out.
It was perfect. But then they run the trick play, the pass by Fant. And so suddenly you have all of these weapons on the outside and potentially Tillman coming back. And then all of a sudden your tight end, who's been pretty good this season, having a nice sort of breakout year. Suddenly the options with him are a fullback. And then also maybe if he gets the ball in space, he might throw the ball on you, apparently. That's a new wrinkle for Josh Heupel in this offense. And he's throwing that stuff in there, putting it on tape to show to Kentucky. And who knows what Kentucky is thinking in that scenario. And also who knows, especially with that fullback set, who knows if they line up like that at the goal line against Kentucky, against Georgia, and then play action and you throw the ball. And then you're totally caught off guard. It's something that to me has totally set this year apart for Heupel. I mean, obviously the wins, going 7-0 is it. But I think one of the reasons that he's been so successful is because he's clearly innovating. He's clearly moving forward. He's clearly evolving and making himself and this team better. And man, I could not be more impressed with everything. Like even in a crap game like this, that just not a crap game, just like a nothing that usually you learn nothing from. He's even setting stuff out there that's going to make his team better. It's beautiful.
That's brilliant. I mean, he did it against Akron too, with that option play that they ran to put that on film. And we haven't seen a ton of that since, but it's still there. I can't imagine how difficult it has to be to prepare for Tennessee right now. I mean, it was already difficult with the tempo. We hear coaches every single week before they play Tennessee talk about the tempo. We heard Brian Kelly talk about it, which we'll talk more about some of his comments. Mark Stoops talked about it today about how tough it is to simulate that. You can't truly simulate it. And then you throw this other stuff in there too. And you heard Nick Saban after they lost to Tennessee. One, he said they made the right adjustments, still couldn't stop Tennessee. Then you heard him on his coach's show talking about when Tennessee lined up in that I formation at the goal line and his players having no clue what to do because they haven't prepared for that against Tennessee, because you don't think of Tennessee as a team that's going to line up under center on the goal line and just punch it in with a fullback. I mean, nobody really does that in college football anymore outside of like maybe Iowa or one of those kind of old school offenses. So you've got to prepare for all this stuff, and there's really not enough time in the week. I mean, Kentucky's fortunate because they've had 2 weeks. I know they've probably done some self-scouting stuff last week and they've moved on to Tennessee, but typically you've got like 6 days to prepare for Tennessee, and you have to cram all this stuff in those 6 days. It doesn't seem possible. So it's got to be very frustrating to be a defensive coordinator preparing for this offense right now.
Yeah, it's a daunting task. But let's do talk. Unless was there anything else? I was going to kind of keep it simple with UT Martin because I feel like we'll reference back to it in the preview for Kentucky probably. But any other real high points with UT Martin before we move on?
I mean, it's just pretty much Tennessee doing what they do and what they wanted to do, and Jalen Hyatt not really padding his stats. I mean, that was just the way the game unfolded. But another huge game in just one half of action. And many people have talked about does Jalen Hyatt sneak into the Heisman conversation at some point? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous the numbers he's putting up, and we've seen Devontae Smith there on that stage before. We've seen wide receivers in the mix there. How crazy would that be for Tennessee to get two people to New York on that Heisman stage? Obviously, that's a long shot because I think Bryce Young, CJ Stroud are going to be there. I don't know how many people they'll have there. It kind of varies, I think, but Hyatt's almost in that conversation. If he keeps doing and putting up the numbers like he is, if he has a huge game against Georgia, I think you legitimately have to talk about him in that conversation. And I think Tennessee fans also have to accept that this is probably his last year at Tennessee because he's already getting some first round buzz. And look, I mean, that's good though for Tennessee because that helps recruiting. You've got guys coming in behind him that hopefully that can perform at a high level. I think in the long run, it's good for Tennessee, but and also if that's what gets Tennessee to the playoff, it's worth it to have him depart after this season.
Matt says Hyatt is plus 7,000 to win the Heisman. Long odds, but real odds. I mean, he's in that conversation at least. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's UT Martin. Like I said, we'll reference back to other stuff that happened in that game, probably in previewing Kentucky. But let's talk briefly. Let's cover this Brian Kelly thing. I was gonna play what he said off of your Twitter account, Zach, but it's like a minute long. Can you, in short form, tell us what Brian Kelly said about Tennessee after he laid the wood to Ole Miss in this game? What did he have to say?
Yeah, basically, he was asked kind of about the progress LSU has made, and then he says, that they weren't that far away in that Tennessee game. That it didn't look as bad as the score indicated, and he insinuated that he didn't try to keep the game close because he went for it on fourth down a few times, which is what Florida did. LSU didn't get it, so it led to short fields for Tennessee at times. And he got a lot of grief for the comments, and I get it. It kind of reminds me of when Jeremy Pruitt said the gap is closing, after like another 30-some point loss to Alabama. It's very frustrating as a fan to hear that kind of comment from your coach because you don't care. You lost by 27 points. That's the only thing that really matters if you're a fan of that particular program. So I understood what he was saying, though. He didn't take field goals. He probably could have kept the game a little bit closer. Tennessee was still going to score. Even if they punt there, Tennessee's going to score because they weren't stopping them. So I don't think that it was going to be like a 7-point game. Maybe he keeps it to 20 points instead of 27. It wasn't a great look for Kelly. I think he should have probably just let that one go. LSU's playing better right now. That win against LSU looks a lot better for Tennessee after they beat Ole Miss, and they've kind of got their act together, which I thought they would. Brian Kelly's not a bad coach. I mean, regardless of if he annoys you or what you think of him, he's done well at Notre Dame. I think he'll do well at LSU. I don't think he's going to go out there and be a Nick Saban type guy, but I think he'll be respectable in Baton Rouge. But that wasn't a good look for him to make those comments at all because it just comes off, like I said, kind of like when Jeremy Pruitt made the same type of comments.
Yeah, it's weird, but it does really go to the point that we've kind of made for the last few weeks. That Heupel changes the way opposing coaches coach. He dictates those games in a huge, huge way because they go, field goals ain't winning it today. And I know for certain you're going to see it with Kentucky. They're talking a big game coming up to this where we're going to talk about this. I mean, their offensive coordinator is like, well, we're not going to go out and score 51 points. We're going to do, but, and that's great that you can say that in a pregame. But when Tennessee suddenly goes up 14-0, 5 minutes into a game, what are you going to do then? Where are you going? What are you doing? Like that's how much he changes the mentality of opposing coaches. And it really is amazing. It's weird that Brian Kelly did that. But hey, so far outside of the Tennessee game, I mean, kind of his results are speaking for themselves. They're in essentially the Alabama game may come down.
Well, they control their
to
own
the West.
destiny at this point. I mean, so does
Yeah.
Alabama. So that game's going to be huge if they both continue winning. And look, if Tennessee beats Georgia and LSU beats Alabama, and all of a sudden it's a rematch with Tennessee and LSU in the SEC championship game, and obviously you would like Tennessee's odds in that game based on the way the first game went. But he really does dictate how you play, and I'm very interested to see Kentucky and their approach this week, because that last year they tried to get into a shootout with Tennessee. I don't know if they decide to scrap that whole plan or not, but it didn't work out too well for them last year. But it seems like that's what teams have been trying to do this year by going for it on fourth down. It almost worked for Alabama. That was a shootout. Florida tried to turn the game that way, and so did LSU. LSU just didn't execute when it mattered.
Yeah, I'm pretty kind of on pins and needles to see where they go, because that's been the talking point with everybody leading up to this Kentucky game. It's like, well, it's such a stark difference in play styles and stuff. Like, that's true, but Kentucky abandoned that essentially last year. So we'll see what they do. But before we get deeply into that, I just wanted to talk. So we're to preview. We're going to give our 3 keys to the Kentucky game, what Tennessee has to do to win that game. But first, I just wanted to mention, because this kind of tangentially has to do with Tennessee. Not even tangentially. I mean, it really does have to do with Tennessee in a pretty big way. But Nick Saban, this week, I don't even know if we mentioned it last week on the podcast, but a girl who jumped onto the field after the Alabama win was just running and ran by Alabama receiver Jermaine Burton, and Burton smacked her in the head. Kind of essentially unprovoked, if the video is to be believed. And I mean, it's video. I mean, he just smacks this girl, and she's just running. He turns around and does it. He smacks her in the back of the head, turns around. I think most of us have probably seen it. And Nick Saban is asked about this week, and oh boy, my stupid iPad is updating Twitter. I had it set up to play. This is dumb and annoying. Well, anyway, I was going to play what Nick Saban said, and my iPad is stupid. Thanks, Apple. Thanks a lot. But Saban essentially goes out and he says that they were scared. And he said, I was scared, and that Burton was scared, and that and that we talked to him. And he said, I don't know if you guys have ever been in a situation like that. Of course, he talked down to the media. It's Nick Saban. And then
much of the media was on the field, by the way.
Well, yeah, exactly. Makes it even more idiotic. And then he says that Burton is now in counseling, and that they're handling it internally with the whole thing. And this is just look, I've always respected Saban as a football coach. I hate him. I hate him deeply to my bones, and it was so amazing to beat him last week. But 7 national championships. He's the greatest to ever do it. This is scumbag stuff. Absolute scumbag stuff. And there's no scared. I mean, Matt says right here in the comments, scared of a 100-pound girl. Give me an absolute freaking break. And they were like, well, what if she said something? What if she did? That doesn't matter. You still gonna smack her in the head? What if she did say something? She didn't, from that video at least. I mean, I don't have actual auditory confirmation, but she's just running past him. She just runs right past him. She didn't get in his face and go, F you, buddy. Alabama can suck it. No, she just ran right past him, and he turned around and smacked her in the back of the head. It's sickening. And he's such a little leprechaun, little demon. I can't stand Nick Saban, and this just add this on top of the list of just gross stuff he's done.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. I haven't tweeted about it or said too much about it, because I've been trying to really figure out how I really feel about the whole situation, because it's so complex and deep. I think, one, obviously, you can't ever do what he did, no matter what, in that situation. I don't care. There's nothing that she could say that would make that action acceptable, right? And I think Nick Saban has not done a very good job of coming out and saying that. I think he's danced around that a little bit. He's tried to talk about how you got to be responsible for your own actions and things like that. But he hasn't really just come out and like straight up condemned like to the extent that I feel like
Never.
he should condemn what Burton did. Now, I think there's two different conversations. I think you got to do that, and then what's the punishment for that? And that's what I've kind of struggled with because look, you this isn't like these things have happened in college football and players have been suspended, they've been dismissed from programs, they've been given second chances. So what is the appropriate punishment there? I mean, and look, I don't think we can ignore the fact. I think it would be wrong of us to ignore the fact that Brew McCoy had issues at USC. He got barred from campus. He was charged with domestic violence. The charges were dismissed. He never went to court. But all that happened, and he got kicked out of school, basically. So he paid, I guess, his punishment for that, and his second chance is at Tennessee now. Now, is this that same level? I mean, I don't know if you can compare the situations because, I mean, the Brew McCoy thing's not on film. We don't really know the exact details of what happened or didn't happen for sure either way. With Burton, it's all right there where you can see it and so it's a little more visual. And I think that the visual element always brings a different emotional response to seeing it. So that's where I've kind of struggled because I don't feel like you can ignore when Alabama fans are in your comments and they bring up Brew McCoy. I don't think you can just ignore that because it is a real conversation you have to have. But at the same time, I feel like Nick Saban has just completely dismissed this situation as a non-issue. And that is bothersome. That's very bothersome.
It's the fact that there is no recognition. I even in the situation, like to me, and again, like you're saying, it's completely subjective or objective, whatever. Subjective, right? Like to me, I don't know that in this situation, I want to see him thrown off the team and tossed into jail. He's kind of lashing out in anger, and it's terrible. And you can't ever do that in any situation. But also, am I saying like cast this guy into freaking outer darkness? Like, no, I don't think that either. But in this situation, it is the fact that Saban is just, let's cover it up, forget about it. He's playing this week. It doesn't matter. There's no, he's in counseling, but it's not anger management or anything like that. Whatever he said, like it just sounded so like he's letting this kid completely off the hook for something absurd that he did that you cannot gloss over like that. And so, and then I mean, on top of the whole Brew McCoy thing, a lot of Alabama fans, I tweeted about this a decent amount. A lot of Alabama fans came back at me and they talked about the Jalen McCullough situation. And they were like, well, Tennessee has a kid that's doing, well, Jalen McCullough is not playing. He's not playing.
He's missed 2 games.
Did you see him out there against Alabama? He wasn't there. He got punished. Or whatever you want to consider it. It sort of seems like right now Tennessee is sort of being like, they're sort of saying he was cleared at a campus level. Heupel even said that during the press conference today. He said he had cleared the campus hurdle and now he has to get through the legal hurdle, or take that however you would like to. Maybe he's coming back this week. We're not really sure, but he didn't play. He hasn't played for 2 weeks. There's a difference. This is not the same. Heupel took the kid out of rotation, and then Jermaine Burton, who's not even good, who has like 300 yards receiving on the entire season, had 40 yards against Mississippi State, didn't score a touchdown. Like they didn't need him. They were going to smash Mississippi State anyway. And he's totally skirting this thing. And it just, I don't know, it made me ill. And
what almost bothers me more than Saban's reaction is the reaction from the national media and the coverage that it's got. Oof. I mean, you see a segment on ESPN where they basically just blasted Tennessee fans for rushing the field and didn't really denounce what his actions. They didn't really talk about why that's wrong or why you can't do that. They just focused on fans rushing the field and why that's a problem. I mean, I know that it can be a dangerous situation. You've got tons of people running on the field. It's chaos. There are things that can happen. I get that. But they act like it's unique to Tennessee. It's the first time Tennessee's stormed the field since 1998. I mean, LSU rushed the field after beating Ole Miss, which they beat 6 of the last 7 times. I don't think that's a whole different conversation.
Well,
but this happens. I mean, Clemson does it after every home game, and the ACC doesn't even fine them because they view it as a tradition. I mean, it happens. It happens in basketball all the time.
And it wasn't some violent riot out there. Like everything was fine for the most. I mean, I didn't see outside of this incident anything in particular that was terrible. I do want to say John Hill said it's apples to oranges for Jalen McCullough to this situation. That's absolutely true. They're not very similar almost in any way at all. I was simply responding to what Alabama fans said to me all week. They kept bringing it up, and I completely agree. It is not comparable, totally different. But just to say that, like, yep, McCullough in this situation, until all of the facts came out and they figured it all out, he's not playing. And then here, the facts are right in front of you on a video, and they don't do anything. It's just gross. That's that. Just had to talk about it because it did have to do with Tennessee, and we didn't know what Saban was going to do last week, and now we know that he didn't do a damn thing. So, all righty. Kentucky. Tennessee is your number 3 team in America. Kentucky, where did they come in the AP poll? This will be another top 25 matchup.
Where are they? Like 18th or 19th? Or are they still
something like that? And this comes down to a few things where Tennessee is clashing so much in style with Kentucky. That's going to be the main talking point that you see across the board. But to me, at a baseline, if Tennessee plays their game here and they dictate games like they have up to this point, where Heupel has so effectively enforced his will on teams, there's a very good reason Tennessee's a 12-point favorite in this one. It's in Neyland Stadium. It's a blackout game. It's going to be wild. It's at 7 p.m. Tennessee fans are going to have plenty of time to get liquored up. I didn't even realize this. 50% chance of rain, Jake says in the comments. Do we see weather slowing down our offense? That's an interesting point. Well, now that I hadn't realized that, we'll bring that into the conversation at least. Right off the top, you would think that does play into the hands of Kentucky. But outside of acts of God on paper, this is a sizable Tennessee win. But it's not. We all know it's not going to be that easy. Mark Stoops is a good coach. He's given Tennessee an incredibly hard time. But I will say, like last year, my talking points going into this game were I genuinely don't know if Tennessee will pull it out. This year I go, if Tennessee plays the way that they're capable of playing, this could potentially be a blowout win. And the only person that beats Tennessee is Tennessee in this scenario. So from there, let's give our 3 keys to the game. Also in this, it might change what you're thinking, but think about the weather. If it does end up raining, does that weigh in? But let's take it from there. And what's your first key for Tennessee to beat the Kentucky Wildcats?
Well, I think my first key is that they have to stop the run, because you kind of mentioned it earlier. Kentucky's offensive coordinator said this week, like, they're not a team that's going to score 50 points a game. Last year, this game turned into a shootout. I think it was like 48-45. It was the final score, and Tennessee just outscored Kentucky. Kentucky couldn't quite keep up with Tennessee. It seems like maybe they learned from last year that that's probably not the best way to try to beat Tennessee. Based on his comment about we're not a team that's going to score 50 points a game, it seems like they're probably going to try to slow the game down, limit Tennessee's possessions. Well, to do that, you got to run the ball. And that's not really, Tennessee's everything that's been said about Tennessee's pass defense, which is true. It hasn't been good. The run defense is the opposite. I think they're number 6 in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game. Their run defense is pretty much elite. I mean, it's top 10 in the nation. If Kentucky tries to just run the ball and limit Tennessee's possessions, that's not going to work. Like, Tennessee will stop them. And that's, so you got to continue to stop the run. I think if Kentucky finds some rhythm running the ball and they can limit possessions, that's going to be their game plan. I don't know if that's going to allow them to beat Tennessee or not if they're successful, but that's their best chance, or at least they think that's their best chance to beat Tennessee. So that's my first thing, is you got to continue to stop the run. I mean, I know they've done it up to this point so far, but you got to keep doing it. It's a new week.
So I had that was my second point, but for the flow of this conversation, I'll make it my first. I had stop Rodriguez and Levis on the ground. It's absolutely key, and just continue what you've been doing. in weeks past. You said it there. Top 10 run defense in America at this point for Tennessee. The defensive line has been far better than I thought it was going to be going into the season, and it's been a giant difference maker for this team. And so I think if you can stop Rodriguez and you force Levis to throw the ball, you are at a massive advantage in this game. Or if you make a couple of stops and you're ahead by 14, 17 points and they're forced to throw the ball, I think you're at a massive advantage. That's where I think it could really open up into a real blowout here. And to that point, there was a Kentucky fan spamming in the comments. I'm totally fine with opposing fans being in the comments, but this guy was being really spammy, so I blocked him. I'm not a blocker of opposing fans in these comments, but I had to. He was putting like CATS and a bunch of different comments. You can't do that here. You get out of here. Get out of here. You can bring your dumb talking points that are stupid. We'll make fun of them, but you can't do that in these comments. But it's absolutely imperative. And outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, this is probably the next best running back you're going to face all season. Georgia has a couple of dudes. They're not nearly what Georgia's probably hoping they would be going into this season, but they're still pretty good. But I think Rodriguez is better than both of them. This is a real test for this defensive line. And I don't want Tennessee fans to skirt over that, because I feel like a lot of Tennessee fans right now are just thinking like, this is easy peasy, baby. We're going to blow Kentucky off that field. That might happen. That really might happen. I think it's a very real scenario where it does. But don't get ahead of yourself, because this kid is really good. Levis is really good when he's playing his best. He is inconsistent and he gets sacked a lot. And that's another point in this that I don't think this is a good time to bring it up right here. 26 sacks on Levis this season. Their offensive line is weak. And so get into the backfield, get to Levis. Don't let him get out of the pocket and make moves there. Keep Rodriguez wrapped up, and you're in a very, very good position, because I think Tennessee's offense will be able to score here.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you move on to the second key here, I think you talked about the sacks. I think the other side of the ball is equally as important, because Kentucky has not generated sacks like I thought they would this year. You think about Mark Stoops. He's a defensive-minded coach. That's why Kentucky has been pretty good, is their defense, combined with him going and getting some NFL offensive coordinators to kind of bring some innovation to Kentucky, because that was not there in previous years under Stoops. But they just haven't been generating pressure the way that you would expect a Mark Stoops team to do. They have 10 sacks in 7 games. It's number 111 in the nation. I mean, they're 2 behind Vanderbilt, who's played 1 more game than them. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. You got to keep that theme going. You cannot let them get to Hendon Hooker and this be like their breakout game. You got to hold up against that. I think that's going to be pretty key. That the offensive line has played so well this year through 7 games, but you're only a little over halfway through the season. You have to keep that up. I mean, the season's not over. So as long as you can protect Hooker and keep Kentucky from having that breakout game, which I think they got talent. Their scheme works to some extent. Don't let them get to Hooker and have him turn the ball over, or a blindside sack fumble, strip sack fumble, or something like that.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes to my second point, which is don't beat yourself. Now you're saying, don't let Kentucky get into the backfield for sacks, 100%. But when I say don't be yourself, don't turn the ball over, and don't Hooker for turnovers, strip sacks, and fumbles in general have been his weakness there if he has one. And so, you take care of the ball. If Jalen Wright is going to be getting a lot of touches, hang on to the ball, young man. We know he's had his problems with keeping the ball in his mitts. And so I think clean ball and avoiding sacks and just winning in the trenches this is true every single week, period. But just winning in the trenches in this game, I think you're going to have an advantage, hopefully on both sides of the ball, with the way that the offensive line has been playing. If they come inspired like they did against Alabama, where they took Will Anderson out of this game, they took the best linebacker in America out of the game, one of the best defensive lines in general out of the game. If they come with that fire in their belly here, it's just, I mean, that's that's the game for Tennessee, because I think if you set the precedent in the trenches, it's over. Because if you're running the ball effectively, that opens up the passing game. The passing game opens up the running game. It's all complementary. We've watched it all season long, and that's going to be the game right there. I think you lay 40 plus on them, and probably win by multiple scores.
To that point, real quick, before we go to the third one, Darnell Wright has got to be one of the most underrated players in the nation right now.
Yes.
He doesn't get talked about nearly enough. I mean, he's got some first-round draft hype, so the NFL draft guys are noticing it. That's the thing with offensive linemen. They're almost like, I may have said this before, they're almost like officials. You don't really notice them until they're letting guys into the backfield, till they're screwing up, basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like you barely hear Darnell Wright's name. I mean, he shut Will Anderson down against Alabama. He is playing at such an extremely high level right now. He is everything that you thought he was during the recruiting process, and he just cannot get enough praise for what he's done. I really feel like he's one of the most underrated players in the country right now.
Absolutely. And Mark brings up, did we see the lineman puke and not at Bama? Yes, we did.
Crawford.
And yeah, that was JJ Crawford, Jeremiah Crawford. And hopefully, not sure if it'll be him or Mincy or what the deal will be there at that left tackle spot. They've both been doing a really admirable job at that position.
It's one of the few times where during fall camp, they talked about how it was 1A and 1B with those guys. And it really seems like that's true because when Mincy was out, Crawford played really well against Alabama. So, I mean, it seems like, what a great position to be in if you're Tennessee. You got two guys that can play left tackle at a high level. When's the last time that was the case?
Yeah, I mean that you can't even say like how much of an advantage that gives you. And to your point, they're kind of unsung heroes of this whole deal.
Cooper Mays has been playing at a really high level.
Oh
too.
Man, everywhere across that line, and then you had Jerome Garvin was the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week this week. So it's and
Spraggins. We're gonna name them all. Let's give Spraggins some love too.
Praise across the line, and they've been playing without really rotating. They've cinched that down outside of Crawford and Mincy.
And they haven't really rotated so much. When it's been Mincy, it's been Mincy. And he was not able to play. Like he was out again this past weekend. Crawford jumps in there. So you're right. They really have kind of set with that rotation. And Glenn Ellerby, the offensive line coach, has done a tremendous job with them, and it's been a complaint for so many years with Tennessee, dating back to after Sam Pittman left in 2012 when Butch Jones was hired. Don Mahoney was criticized a lot, and it just got worse from there. People weren't fans of Will Friend by the end of his tenure either at Tennessee. So it's nice that Tennessee's got a legitimately good offensive line coach that seems to be developing his players and getting the most out of them.
Absolutely. It's been beautiful to watch this whole year. My third key here. Let me see. I wrote it down. Let me make sure I say the right thing here. So my third key that I have a lot of confidence in Tennessee doing this, especially I might feel differently about this one if this was in Lexington. But since it's in Neyland Stadium, I feel pretty good about this one, but you got to get up early. Go up by 14, 17, 21 points in the first 10 minutes of the game and score on every possession and get stops early when everybody's fresh and feeling good, and have Kentucky chase you, because Levis is at his worst when he's chasing and having to throw the ball on every possession. It eliminates in a big way a lot of what Rodriguez can do. It makes them change the way that they're going to call this game, I think, where it'll turn them into what it sort of became last year, where they sort of noticed like, all right, we're not going to stop this Tennessee offense. We got to just try to go blow for blow at them. Like I said, it's easy to say this in the post game, like Kentucky's OC did this week, where he said, we're not going to score 50 points. It's not what we do. Yeah, it's easy to say that. But if Tennessee comes out and goes up 21-0 in the first 10 minutes of the game, what are you going to do? Because you're either going to switch the way that you play or you're going to lose by 40.
Well, it's the somebody commented it to me when I posted that video of the Kentucky OC, and it's always one of the greatest quotes in sports history is everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, right?
Exactly.
And that's what it's like playing Tennessee.
Yes. And that's been everybody all season long. It was kind of funny today. I told you about this before we got on here. I was watching Kentucky Sports Radio, who is if you don't, after Tennessee beats Kentucky at something, if you don't go listen to everything Kentucky sports radio does in the wake of that Kentucky loss, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's so hilarious. Because there's nobody they hate losing to more. They would tell you it's Louisville, it's Duke, it's not. They hate Tennessee more than anybody, and it's not even close, I don't think. But I was listening to Kentucky Sports Radio. They actually have a football podcast. And I was listening to that. It's not Matt Jones. It's two guys I've never heard of, but these boys, the belief is real in Kentucky this week. And I'm not saying that for sure Tennessee is going to come in, stomp a mud hole in Kentucky, but Tennessee's a better team. I said it earlier. There's a reason Tennessee's a 12-point favorite here. And this thing in Neyland Stadium with this crowd bearing down, it could get out of hand quick if Kentucky's not careful. But their talking points were Kentucky is ready for this environment because they played and won at Florida. They equated the swamp with Neyland Stadium at its best, and that's a mistake, number one.
The swamp can be great, but it's not.
It can be great.
The same swamp right now.
Exactly. It's not great right now. And then they are very certain that Tennessee is looking beyond Kentucky. Tennessee is only concerned with the Georgia game.
And that goes into my third key, by the way.
And it might. They're convinced Tennessee's coming into this one flat-footed, which, again, total mistake. Josh Heupel it's kind of his signature thing at this point. There hasn't been a game. There have been games where I'm like, how are you this prepared? Not how are you this unprepared? There have been games like UT Martin. They came out flat in the first 5 minutes, and then they had 52 points at halftime. There has not been a game where I've been like, whoa, he doesn't have his kids' heads in the right place. This is crazy. Heupel is focused on the week that they're playing in. You can say it, and then there are coaches that say it and don't really do it, and he says it and he really does it. And so I think that's a fool's errand for them to say that. And just on the whole, I mean, they think Will Levis is a Heisman winner, and they think that they're going to come in and beat Kentucky, and it's, again, pretty hilarious. Or they're going to come in and beat Tennessee, I mean. But, that's their own. They can think that. I think they're setting themselves up for some pain there. But so to your third point, you said that it goes into Tennessee not looking forward. What is your third point?
Yeah, I think you're getting to a point in the season now where the hype is really starting to build with Tennessee. They're getting first place votes. I think they got 13 or something this week. Your odds of reaching the college football playoff are getting up there close to 50%. The goals for the team have always been to get to Atlanta, which of course is a precursor to reaching the college football playoff, right? But now those goals are very, very real. I mean, you've put yourself in a great position to achieve everything you set out to achieve. I mean, and going into the season, opposing fan bases laughed at Tennessee's players when many of them were saying, we want to get to Atlanta. Hendon Hooker says he's coming back. He tells Josh Heupel, we're going to Atlanta. I mean, these are goals that they've had for well over a year. But now that it's real, these are still college kids, and they have to continue to keep that same mindset because they still can blow this. They can lose to Kentucky. Like you said, Tennessee should win, but Kentucky's very capable of beating Tennessee. They're a good team. You got the Georgia game. South Carolina's playing really well right now. That's a game that's on the road. It's not the best environment in college football, like Shane Beamer says, but it is a pretty good environment down there in Columbia. I'll give them that. It is. And those are games where we've seen college football playoff contenders before lose these games. Tennessee can lose these games. Anybody can lose these games. It's any given Saturday type deal. So it's very important that you're getting this late in the season. Kentucky's not an automatic win. It's not. And you have to do everything right. You have to execute, and you cannot think 1 second about what waits beyond Kentucky. You cannot think about Georgia. Because if you lose this game to Kentucky, suddenly that Georgia game is not nearly as important on a national level. Suddenly you don't control your own destiny anymore. You've got work to do to get to Atlanta, or you need help to get to Atlanta to get to the playoffs. So this Kentucky game, it's cliche, but right now this is the biggest game of the year for Tennessee, and they have to go into this game with that mindset. And you talked about UT Martin. We saw that a little bit at the beginning where UT, they come out and they score, and they let UT Martin score, and then UT Martin seems like they're going down the field pretty well. And then they kind of reined it in and, you know, took care of business there. And we talked about it in our group text that we have, where thank goodness that was UT Martin at the beginning of that game and not another like a Kentucky or another SEC opponent that can put up some points in a hurry. Tennessee could have got down 21-7 or something really quick in that game with a quality opponent. And look, it was a noon game coming off the emotional high of beating Alabama. I wasn't surprised that was the case. Luckily, the schedule set up well for them, just like it did after Florida when they had the bye week and they were able to prepare for LSU and come down on that emotional high from beating Florida. It was fortunate that it was UT Martin after the Alabama game, but hopefully that was a little wake-up call for him. And I think you're right. Josh Heupel has done a tremendous job of keeping this team focused. And I think this team I think it's in their DNA to do that. I mean, they've talked about Jalen Hyatt and said, Alex Golish said he came into the facility after his performance against Alabama and he's catching balls off the judge, doing extra work. Said you would have never known that he scored 5 touchdowns against Alabama and had this huge game. He just put his head back down and went right back to work. There was no difference in him. So I think that's the personality of this team, but it's really important that continues to be the personality of this team. They cannot start feeling themselves because you want to go 15-0, you're just at the halfway point. There's a lot of season left.
Well, it's crazy to think that. I mean, if you want to go 15-0, you're not even at the halfway point.
Yeah.
This is the halfway point
coming
up. Yeah, 100%. Could not agree more. I think the thing that has set this team apart in Heupel's second year, outside of the incredible coaching job that Heupel has done, is the student leadership, is the athlete leadership that this team has found. Hendon Hooker, being the old man that he is at age 24 or whatever, he brings such a calming presence and an incredibly calm hand in crazy situations. He does not get rattled. It's almost like like you think in the late portions of that Alabama game, it was like he got exponentially even better in those high pressure moments. It was like it focused him somehow.
I don't think we can compliment him enough for what he did at the end of Alabama. I mean, I posted that little video clip of it mashed together of him and Patrick Mahomes at the end of the Buffalo Bills playoff game last year. And it's the exact same situation. He did against Alabama what Patrick Mahomes did against Buffalo. I mean, it was the same drive, 2 passes that to get into field goal range, no room for error whatsoever, hand in his face, making those completing those passes. Like that's NFL level stuff. That
it is.
You can say whatever you want about the system and what Hooker will be like at the next level. They said the same things about Patrick Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech, that he ran an air raid offense and it wouldn't translate to the NFL and all this stuff. And look, he's the best quarterback in the NFL, or one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not saying that's what Hendon Hooker is going to be, because we really don't know until a guy gets to the NFL. But he has those same characteristics. And as much hype as he's getting, I still think he might be underrated.
I agree. I mean, he's just cool hand Luke out there, man. And it starts there. I think more than anything, Heupel has done a ridiculously good job at his job. But the athlete leadership is just massive, and you even talk. I've talked to so many former players, and hopefully I won't say it because it's not set in stone. Hopefully we're gonna have another former Vol on this week to join the show. But we got to get it set in stone first before I announce anything. But I've talked to so many, and the guys off of those championship teams, the 97 team that won the SEC title, the 98 team that won the national championship, they talk constantly when you ask them about what made those teams great, about how they were all holding each other accountable, where they were going around and, another player would screw up and a coach didn't come to admonish them. Another player would go and be like, hey, you're messing with our money. Like this is on me as much as it's on you. Don't do that again. And, they talk about that a lot. And I think you have that here. And that's, you honestly, there's not like a value that you can just put on that. I mean, it's priceless in a situation like this, because it creates a situation like at the end of that Alabama game where they're totally unflappable. they're not going to be shaken by that moment because they have that leadership, and it's so good. But so
What's
to wrap,
incredible about that, though, real quick before we move on, is the fact that under Jeremy Pruitt in that last season, you had players, Austin Pope, saying that just putting on the jersey was enough for those guys. And it's just a complete 180 from that, from putting on the jersey. No, we're here to win a championship, and we're going to make sure everybody's doing the right thing and what they need to be doing. And just the fact that they've changed the culture that fast, it's not just Josh Heupel. I mean, he's facilitated it, but it's these players that have put it upon themselves to attack every day with that attitude. It's really incredible.
Absolutely. But to just wrap up, we'll wrap up both of our 3 points. And I actually want to talk about a comment here and address it before we leave the Kentucky topic. But I had stop Rodriguez and Levis on the ground and win in the defensive trenches. Don't beat yourself. Play clean football, and then get up early and make Kentucky chase you. Those are my 3. And Zach, your 3 keys were
stopping the run, not giving up sacks, not letting them get to Hendon Hooker, and then just staying within yourself, not looking ahead to Georgia, not looking ahead to a national championship or Atlanta, focusing on Kentucky, treating it like it's the biggest game you've ever played in, and it's the only game that matters. If you can do that, I think they'll be okay, because we've seen what Tennessee does worse as long as they stay within themselves and execute, and they don't let other outside influences affect how they play.
So there you go. There's our 3 each, 3 keys to the game. And then before we leave this Kentucky conversation and go to our exact prediction, we'll give our actual, numerical prediction for the game. But I wanted to address this because we've been saying here, a loss, if Tennessee is not careful, a loss is 100% possible here, and it would be devastating. Obviously, it ends your college football playoff chances essentially, or makes the Georgia game an absolute must-win if you want to make the playoff. But it is possible, even if Tennessee is this double-digit favorite, and we know that Tennessee is better than Kentucky in all these different ways. But I like this question right here for Paul Lindsay. He says, now after teams have had a chance to look at Tennessee on film, what does an opponent have to do to beat Tennessee? What would it take for Kentucky to do that? And I think it's a great question because we talk about so much what Tennessee can do to beat you, but what would it take to beat Tennessee?
I think a lot of defensive coordinators are asking that same question right now, because we've seen a lot of frustrated coaches after they played Tennessee. But I think it really comes down to turnovers. That's why I mentioned not letting Hendon Hooker get sacked, because those fumbles or Hendon Hooker throwing an interception, which he really doesn't do, that's your best chance, because these guys are so open all the time. And it's just not even – I noticed at the UT Martin game, just watching from the press box when you're watching the whole field and you don't see the same view as TV, there's guys open on like every play. Like, it is insane how often, and I know it's just UT Martin, but still, it's insane how often guys are open. Like, just the way that Tennessee can attack you, running the ball if they want. If you're playing in deep coverage and these soft shell coverages, they can run the ball. If you try to play man coverage, they're going to beat you every single time, just about, because Jalen Hyatt is more than just fast. He's a really good wide receiver. He knows how to vary his speeds. He knows how to kind of get inside leverage and make these DBs do stuff they don't want to do. So I think it really comes down to getting turnovers, forcing Tennessee into bad decisions and turning the ball over. And we really haven't seen them do that. But other than that, if Alabama can't keep you from scoring 52 points, who is going to stop you? I mean, Georgia is in that same neighborhood. They're better, I believe, than Alabama on defense, but not that much better. They're not worlds. But I mean, we saw last year they played 2 games and they split them. I mean, these are fairly similarly talented teams. So it really comes down to turnovers. Like, I think that's the only way you can really get to Tennessee at this point, because even with Tennessee's bad pass defense, they're still going to be able to outscore you if they don't turn the ball over.
Yep, it comes down to Tennessee beating itself, at least this week. I actually do think so. My response to that would be you have to have better players in a significant way than what Tennessee is putting on the field, at least defensively. And Georgia last year for sure had it. This year, I think they still do. Obviously, this will be a discussion for next week. But you have to be so crazily talented. Somebody said it here. in the comments. Let me see if I can find it again. How do you beat Tennessee? I lost it, but somebody said you have to have 2 extra defenders on the field. That's essentially true. Heupel, when the run game is working and it frees up the pass game, when the pass game is working, frees up the run game. When they get that back and forth complementary ball going, there's not some X factor. Here's how you stop it. There's not. Schematically, what he does, it's not just like, here's what you do. That thing doesn't exist. The thing is to have the talent where Jalen Hyatt can't run straight past you, and you just have the sort of otherworldly ability to stay in coverage with him.
Yeah, that's not happening. He's got like Tyreek Hill speed. I mean, yes, it is that elite.
It's like, it's not that easy. There's not some, here's what you do. The way that he spreads these teams out and clears out the middle of the field for the run game, or runs decoys and does all of this stuff that he does, is just he's like this dude is coaching chess while you're playing checkers. Like,
he's staying a step ahead too, because you're seeing Tennessee use the middle of the field a little more in the receiving game. You're seeing them throw some slants. You're seeing Jalen Hyatt kind of catch some of those balls in the middle of the field, something they didn't do much of last year. So he keeps throwing different looks. It's not just the same. It's the same system. It's the same running with tempo, but we've seen him bat off of that at times. He's throwing different things at these teams, which makes it even more difficult. And then somebody mentioned that Kentucky might spy Hendon Hooker. Well, kind of what you mentioned there, you can't afford to waste a defender on Hooker in that situation. You really can't. If you leave a guy spying him, it's one less guy that's stopping the run. It's one less guy that you're able to drop into coverage, and hopefully, if you're the defense, try to stop Jalen Hyatt down the field, or Ramel Keaton or Brew McCoy. So that's really not a good option either, because Hooker's not a run first guy. I mean, he does it when he has to, and he can do a lot of damage with his legs, but he's not bailing out of the pocket at the first sight of pressure. He can stay in there and stay poised and still complete passes and do what he needs to do. So I don't think that's a good option either, necessarily, to spy him.
They're really, like I said, out athlete this offense. And I said Georgia's about as close as it gets. And I think Tennessee will probably, to whatever extent, struggle against Georgia's defense. I'm honestly really fascinated to see how it works out, because they're as close as any team is going to get to just being pound for pound Tennessee's offense this season. I'm interested to see how that goes. But if you're similarly talented or less talented, like Kentucky may or may not be, you look at it on paper, think whatever you want there. Everybody's going to have their own opinion without seeing the head-to-head matchup yet. But when you're in that situation, it just really is like, pick your poison. Because if you sell out for the pass, they're going to hit you on the run. If you sell out for the run, they're definitely going to hit you on the pass. And if they don't do either of those, Hendon Hooker's going to run the ball on you. And if they don't do that, they'll go into like some weird fullback run pass from a tight end. Like they go all over the place. And then in this game, Titanium Titan, who I think, just looking at comments from earlier, I think this is a Kentucky fan.
Yes.
Is Tillman coming back? Supposedly in this game, we said it earlier, Heupel won't commit to it, but he was on the depth chart they released today. And so was Jalen McCullough, by the way. So do it, think about that, whatever you will. They may both be back, but they've done this before. Juwan Mitchell was on the depth chart before and he didn't play. Think what you want.
If you're a Kentucky fan and you're not super familiar with Josh Heupel and kind of how he handles these things, every Monday and Thursday when he speaks to the media, it's the same answer on almost every injured player is, we'll see where they're at the end of the week. So you're not going to get a concrete answer until 7:00 Eastern time, Saturday night, probably.
From folks that have seen him, they are practicing and putting him in positions leading up to this game as if he will play. That's what I've heard. Okay. So that's just from searching your 247s, your VolQuests, whatever, what everybody's saying, that they all go to practice and things. That's what it sounds like, but there's no commitment from Heupel on that. But it's just pick your poison. I think Kentucky has to come into this game thinking Tennessee is going to get theirs. I would say for them, they got to be hoping to keep Tennessee under 40 and to just hope they score 40. Like, that's what I would be shooting for if I was Kentucky. You got to go, they're going to score 35 plus probably. we got to score 40. That would be my mindset if I'm Kentucky going into this game. I think it probably is to whatever extent. They know they're not going to fully dictate this game with ball control like they did last year. This Tennessee offense is far better than it was last year. It's not even in the same ballpark. That Tennessee's offense last year could not move the ball without tempo. Mm-hmm. And this year they can. They can absolutely move the ball without tempo. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. If I did know the answer to that, I might be the defensive coordinator for Kentucky. Who knows? I'd be making those big bucks in the SEC. So there's basically our preview of the Kentucky game. Now to predict the game. Let's before we predict the game though, let's talk about we missed this earlier. I skipped right over and I realized I did it after I already had. Tennessee got a commitment from a recruit this week, and I want to talk briefly about that before we give our prediction to end the show. Caleb Beasley, cornerback from the state of Tennessee, 4-star guy, commits to Tennessee, I believe, on Friday night.
Yeah, late Friday, yeah.
Yeah, I had his profile open here. Let's see. According to 247, he's the number 2 player in the state of Tennessee, number 19 player in America at his position, and the number 171 player overall. Tennessee in the lead for the number 1 player in the state of Tennessee, Edwin Spillman, it looks like, at least according to 247. And then
that's his is that Beasley's teammate? Are they
let's see. Beasley is both Lipscomb Academy in Nashville. Where my mom went to school, actually, ironically. Or what it was I think it went by a different name back then. But anyway, so Beasley commits, and the thing that I want to talk about that I don't think has been talked about a lot with Heupel and recruiting, we've talked about in past weeks, like the crazy experience that you gave to recruits at the Florida game and at the Alabama game, and how that's going to change recruiting, and that's absolutely true. And Lord knows right now you need a freaking DB to play for this team at the moment. So that's very welcome help. It is the class of 2024. You're not going to get them for 2 years, but in-state recruiting, Butch emphasized it so much. And, we're going to build a wall around the state or whatever he said, and, lock down the state. And then Pruitt didn't do that at all. He burned relationships. It was horrendous.
He just wanted to recruit 3-star dudes from Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. That was his whole MO. And then Heupel now, in the 2023 class, he has the number 1 player from the state of Tennessee coming in, but that's basically it out of the top 10. I have to go back and look to make sure.
Yeah, I think that's.
I'll confirm this. It went to the national rankings and not just the.
No, I got you. That's the only one they've got, but they, Chance Fitzgerald is the ranked number 10 in this class, and that's a player that's trending up that Tennessee seems to be focusing on. And then you got the one that's weird to me is a Darius Redmond from Powell, ranked as the number 7 player in the state, but a 4-star guy, but it doesn't seem like his recruitment adds up to where he's ranked. Tennessee's not really showing a ton of interest in him. You think that they would, being a 4-star guy from Powell, but it doesn't seem like they really are that much. So that's an odd one. I don't know if the recruiting sites have got that wrong, that he's not in line with the evaluations that Tennessee and other programs have, but that's a strange one to me.
I don't know. I was looking at everything while you were saying all that and trying to listen all at the same time. But this, I like the way that Heupel is handling the in-state recruiting. That was going to kind of be my overarching point here with this discussion. Butch emphasized it like crazy. Pruitt didn't emphasize it at all. I like that Heupel is just going, when we want kids from the state of Tennessee, we're going to get them. And that's going to be that. Because you think about it, I've always thought that the overemphasis on owning the state of Tennessee, obviously the University of Tennessee should be the prime spot for kids from the state of Tennessee to go. When you get a 5-star player from the state of Tennessee, they should want to go to Tennessee. But on the whole, Fulmer won with players from Georgia, players from South Carolina. This wasn't built. Peyton Manning was from Louisiana. The greatest years with this team weren't fully built on players from Tennessee. This isn't like Wisconsin or Nebraska where you got to get these, corn-fed giant dudes out of Nebraska, and that's what the team is built on. It's Tennessee is a pretty middling state in terms of football talent. No offense to anybody that plays high school football in Tennessee.
It has got better, especially in the mid-state.
It has absolutely gotten better since kind of Fulmer's days and things, but it's not fully built on that. And I just like that Heupel, like, he's not just like everything is built on recruiting in the state of Tennessee. He's getting these dudes. He's getting the number 1 player from the state of Tennessee. It looks like he may get the number 1 and number 2 players from the state of Tennessee in this coming year. And that's what you want, but you're not going to hang your hat on it. What you really got to hang your hat on is just getting the elite talent in America. And I think that's where they're going. So I love to see this, but I don't want to see them just be like, we got to get every guy from Tennessee, and if we don't, it's a total failure. It's not a total failure if you don't get every guy from Tennessee. It's a total failure if you don't get every elite guy from the state of Tennessee.
Which, that's what I think is important with this in-state recruiting, and what Josh Heupel is doing is you build all these relationships and you go visit guys and you make the effort, even when necessarily there isn't a guy that maybe you want that bad, but you do that to set yourself up for later when that 5-star guy comes through. Because if you ignore it, especially like the way Derek Dooley did, and then all of a sudden Von Bell comes up and you haven't shown any interest in him, and then Butch comes in, he had no chance. And it's not an excuse for Butch, but he really had no chance in that situation because Dooley just burned those bridges so badly. You have to keep those relationships at all times, no matter what the talent is. You have to keep those relationships good, because you don't know when the next T. Higgins is going to come through, and you don't want to see them slip away to Clemson or Georgia or South Carolina or anything like that. I think he's doing a good job of that.
I agree. And when those opportunities come up, you got to capitalize. I think somebody said it in the comments over here, don't let it be Trevor Lawrence all over again, where for 4 years, or however long he was there, I don't think he played all 4 years, but for the entire time he was at Clemson, all we ever heard was former Tennessee fan. And there was a freaking picture of him as a kid in a Tennessee jersey and all of that stuff. And then he goes to Clemson, and he's
him and Higgins and Amari Rodgers all there at the same time. I mean, it was brutal to watch. All those players should have been at Tennessee, and even was it Trevor Etienne? I can't remember which one's which now.
Yeah,
from Louisiana, but oddly grew up rooting for Tennessee and kind of wanting to go there, and they didn't really go after him at all, and he ended up at Clemson.
Yeah, get them all, but just don't let those dudes slip by anymore. And I like Heupel is making those inroads, repairing those relationships, getting back in that game, clearly getting already some of the top guys from the state of Tennessee. But it's not this, everything is built on Tennessee, we're locking down the state. No, I want great players from Georgia. I want great players from Alabama, from Texas, from wherever, California with Nico Iamaleava.
Hey, he's got a couple from Louisiana already too, which is not common.
I don't care where the great players come from. Just make sure they go to Tennessee. That's all I want. That's all I want to see. But I wanted to hit that before we moved on to our predictions for the Kentucky game, because I thought it was significant there. And like somebody mentions Mazio Bennett here. We talked about him last week on the show. So you can go listen back to that if you want to. We posted it as a separate clip too for recruiting. But there's that for the recruiting segment. And then finally, just our predictions. We're already at an hour 20. Been really long shows this season. When there's great stuff to talk about, we want to talk about it all. But Zach, Tennessee, Kentucky, Neyland Stadium, 7 p.m. Saturday night blackout game. Supposedly, they haven't officially announced that yet, I guess. But blackout game. We think it's going to be a wild one. Does Tennessee pull it out, Zach?
Yeah, it's going to be a huge game. Chad Johnson, NFL wide receiver, might be on the sidelines for Tennessee. His daughter, if you remember, he was at the LSU game for his daughter who was visiting LSU for track. And that was when he first kind of became enthralled with Jalen Hyatt. He saw him in person, and he tweets about him all the time. And he tweeted that he wants to be on the sideline, take a picture with Hyatt. So Danny White in Tennessee needs to make that happen, because Chad Johnson in a primetime game on Tennessee sideline would be great for recruiting. But as far as the actual game goes, I definitely think Tennessee wins. They're the better team. They have this electric offense. It just comes down to how well do they execute? Does the weather play a factor? Does it rain? How does Kentucky play the game? I think Tennessee scores like they have been. I'm not going to go 50 points. I think Kentucky's defense is good enough to cause some problems, and I think they'll try to limit Tennessee's possessions. And I think Kentucky will score some points. I think Will Levis will make some plays, but ultimately, I think Tennessee wins 45-35.
45-35. I like it.
So they don't cover, but they do win by double digits.
Yeah. So again, 12-point spread as of this morning. It might move depending on the direction throughout the rest of the week. I'll say it to everybody that's watching. Folks are already doing it here, but if you want to drop in and comment your prediction for the game, I'll read them here in just a second and see what everybody is feeling for Tennessee this week. I can tell you Kentucky fans think they're going to win. I mentioned that earlier. They're feeling confident. So somebody does believe in Kentucky here. I have always had the policy with the Florida game that Tennessee loses to Florida until they don't. This year they didn't. They proved me wrong. I said that Florida would win. Tennessee went out and they said, Charlie, you're an idiot. Check this out. And they won that football game. And with Kentucky, I have the exact flip of that. Like, Kentucky fans can have all this confidence and think like, oh, this is the one. We knock them off when they're having a breakout year and whatever. Tennessee beats Kentucky until they don't. What is it at this point? 3 out of the last 42 Kentucky has won or something. I mean, it just is absurd. Crazy.
Even how much in 2018, when Tennessee was 5-7, they beat number 12 Kentucky under Pruitt. I mean,
exactly. Jeremy Pruitt beat one of the best teams Kentucky football has ever had. Our worst coach ever beat you during your best year ever. Like,
and that was a Tennessee team that got blown out by Vanderbilt too, by the way.
Don't bring that up.
Just to your point there.
Jeremy Pruitt doesn't exist in my mind.
Yeah.
So I've always had that policy, and I still do. What am I supposed to say? Like, yeah, Kentucky can feel these magic feelings, and we're going to do the blah, blah, blah. I don't know wwhy you would feel that way. How do you feel that way? I don't feel that way going into the Florida game. I feel like that game is cursed. How do you not feel that way at this point? like for three wins out of the last 40 some odd games? Come on, guys. Like, let's be real.
And one of those was Derek Dooley, so.
That's true. Playing against a friggin' wide receiver at quarterback. But so to me, this is a Tennessee win. I do think Kentucky mucks it up. I think they do. They're good at making games ugly. That's kind of their MO. They are genuinely good at that. Mark Stoops is a solid coach. He's done a very good job there, and I think he'll continue doing that until he leaves for Oklahoma after Brent Venables gets fired or whatever. And so I do think they're going to give Tennessee problems for a half. Tennessee might only have a 3-point lead at the half, a 7-point lead at the half or something, and you're feeling uncomfortable. But I just think in that second half, Tennessee opens it up. And in the third, late third, fourth quarter, you end up kind of running away with it. I'll go 41 for Tennessee. I think Tennessee crosses 40 because it's in Neyland. I might feel different if it was in Lexington, but you're just going to have that blackout behind you and all the craziness. And it's going to be a wild, wild environment, I think. Mm-hmm. 41 for Tennessee. For Kentucky, 30. I'll say they do get 30. So that Tennessee is not covering in my book. So you were something
45-35.
45-35. I'm 41-30. Now let's go through what some folks are saying here in the comments. Oh, I gotta go. A lot of people weighed in. Thanks to everybody for watching and commenting. Alicia says 48-24. TJ says 48-17. This is all for Kentucky for folks not watching. Mark says 55-3. The ultimate Tennessee optimist, and Mark Jones. Devin says 48-13. Sean 52-34. Paul Lindsay 55-27. Tennessee. And Facebook user, this is an anonymous account, 45-21. Brittany says 55-24. Y'all think we're gonna blow the doors off them?
I mean, that's very possible. Very possible.
It is 100% possible. I think if they do all of the keys that we said, and especially the one where I said they get out to like a 21-point lead quickly, a blowout is a very real possibility. I think Zach says give Kentucky a basketball score, 66-35.
That's also very possible too.
Yeah, and that Michael says bad matchup for Kentucky, Tennessee, big 49-24. So everybody a little more confident than we are. Hey, this Kentucky team's solid, man.
I
they're
respect
not
Mark.
bad.
I respect Mark Stoops a lot. I think he's a really good coach. I think for what he's done at Kentucky has been very impressive. I agree. It's not a great matchup for Kentucky. They
Bad
don't
matchup.
match. And, a team like Alabama that can put up points with Bryce Young or Ole Miss, I mean, those teams match up better with Tennessee. These kind of try to slow it down and turn this into an ugly game. Tennessee's proved they can win those games. I mean, they won that game against Pittsburgh that way. Florida kind of turned it into that where they, it got a little ugly there and they had to grind it out and they pulled it out and they won that game. So they've proven they can win those games this year, which is huge because last year that was kind of where they didn't do so well, like that Purdue game where it kind of got sketchy there at the end and they weren't able to close it out. Purdue got a little help from the referees there, but
I do like this prediction right here. Volter says Vols by 2 touchdowns, but then gives the actual prediction 48-18. That's a little bit more than 2 touchdowns there.
That's a little over 4.
Yes. So, but I love the confidence. Especially now that I listen to the Kentucky fans and their predictions and how they're really they're feeling it. This is, and they're playing with house money. Well, Tennessee's a favorite.
Look, we can't say too much because in the past Tennessee fans had the same conversation only to be let down at playing Florida so many times. Like, this is the year they can get Florida, and then like you said, your rule, it's a win for Florida till it's not, and that's typically what it's been. So I can understand where they're at, and just really glad that that's not where we're at anymore.
100%. It feels good. And
that's a good stat here from Brittany. I didn't realize this, that Josh Heupel is 14-0 when leading at the half. That's very interesting.
Wow. And that would include, Alabama was up by 8.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. That's a great stat. And I like Rick Barnes and Heupel better than Kentucky. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Barnes
he owns them.
He's got Calipari by the old gonads, and it's that's my favorite thing. All right. I think that is it. We both think Tennessee will win. Basically, everybody in the comments does too. And so go and do it. That's all
if you're going into the game, be loud. Make it another crazy environment. This is a special season, and every home game is you only get so many of them. Like I said, you only get so many experiences in Neyland, so many fall Saturdays. Make it count.
Make them regret what I said earlier from the Kentucky podcast I listened to, where they said Kentucky is definitely prepared for this environment because they played at Florida earlier this season. Make them regret saying that. If you're going
there, go in with a Will Anderson vibe. Just be offended that they even come in the stadium.
But don't come scared like Will Anderson did inside Neyland Stadium.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you bring the heat there. All right, Charlie Burris, that is Zach Reagan. Thanks to everybody for watching. This is probably our biggest live audience ever here. To my point earlier about how the numbers have just been blowing up. You guys are amazing. Amazing. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thank you. To everybody that watches, everybody that comments, hit the old like button, hit the subscribe button, that notification bell down there, and follow, rate, review, subscribe. Y'all know what to do. And I gotta address this in the comments before we go. Dustin
okay.
This is a Kentucky fan that was spamming earlier, and I had to block him. He said, "Look, Charlie, I'm sorry for spamming in Facebook. Please unban me. I watched Zach and Austin for the Titans stuff." I get it. I watch Zach and Austin for the Titan stuff too. I'll tell them to do that. Dustin.
All right.
I'll make sure. All right. Now that is it. Charlie Burr, Zach Reagan, A to Z Sports. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.